All right, everyone, welcome back to Financial Clarity for Doctors. I'm Corey Janoff, joined as always by Rachelle Vanderzanden.
Hello.
And today we want to talk about how you value your time. In economics, we talk a lot about opportunity cost. So, what is the next best thing you can do with any available resource? Like a dollar spent over here is money that can't be spent over here. Time spent on this activity is time you can't spend on an activity over there. And um, we only have a finite amount of time. We only have a finite amount of income. So, for example, recording this the day after tax day, you'll hear it probably in May sometime. But if you can complete your taxes on your own over a 3 hour span, hypothetically, let's say you have a relatively straightforward tax scenario, it doesn't take you super long. Or you could potentially spend those 3 hours working and earn income over those 3 hours. How much money are you really saving by doing the taxes on your own? Like, could you work and outsource it? If it costs, if you earn more money than it costs to pay the accountant, that economic logic, the opportunity cost there would suggest the optimal circumstance is work the 3 hours, pay someone else to do it. Now, if the reverse is true, if the cost it would you would incur to pay an accountant to do your taxes is greater than what you could earn over the time it would take you to do it yourself, then you're better off doing it yourself and saving the money. So we'll dive into this more and also talk about how we don't live in a vacuum. It's not about either work or outsource activity or
Yep.
work to outsource activity or do it yourself to save the money.
Yep. Yep. So, in the episode, we're going to talk a little bit about kind of how to value your time, like how to determine how much money is my time worth. And then we can think about using those numbers to help you make decisions in life, which is really what financial planning is all about. So, sometimes it's about money. Sometimes it's about wanting to have more time and how those things work together. And it's important to kind of be thoughtful about that trade off. I think sometimes we work just because we think we're supposed to work to pay for all the things without giving it a lot of thought. Like, how much am I earning? How am I spending my money? How am I putting that money towards my goals? All of those kinds of things. So, the first step when we're thinking about this is really just to calculate how much you earn per hour. And it's easier when you're salaried, like, okay, I get $260,000 a year. That's how much I earn per hour. But it's important also to take into consideration like how much time you spend at work, but also how much time you spend doing like those random little things that you end up doing at home for work, how much time it gets to and from work. Because if you're not working, you don't have to spend that time in the car either. Like all of that time goes into like your total time that it takes to earn money. And that's kind of what we're trying to get to. The assumption, like when we're thinking about this in terms of economics, the assumption is kind of like you have unlimited time and you can earn unlimited money if you spend your time earning money, which isn't the reality, but it makes it easier to kind of look at this in a numerical way. So we're going to do that first, and then we'll kind of circle back to some of the non-numerical things. Um, I think once you have your hourly pay rate, you can start to use that to ask yourself questions. If I work 5 more hours at $100 per hour, and now I have 500 extra dollars, which can buy me XYZ, whatever it is that you could buy with that $500, is that worth it to me? Or would I rather work less and have like 5 more hours instead of 500 more dollars? Like those are the kinds of questions that we can think about asking yourselves. The the one thing to keep in mind, especially for medical professionals, that is that this is different at different stages of your career. Like as a trainee, you don't have a lot of choices. Like it is what it is. You have to work this amount of time. And it's not even about money, like it is about money, but it's also like you can't get to the next stage unless you do this. So you have to do it. So there's a certain amount of like we're making an investment in our future too.
Yeah, and there's not, I mean, it's in some cases you potentially could moonlight for more money at maybe a higher dollar per hour than your resident or
Mm-hmm.
fellow salary. But in a lot of cases, yeah, like Rochelle said, you're just here's when you show up when you're told to show up and you
Yep.
go home when you're told to go home. If your institution follows the 80-hour cap per week. Um, and hopefully you're not all working 80 hours every single week. Some weeks might be a little busier than others. But yeah, hypothetically, let's say you're making $90,000 per year in residency or fellowship. Now, some of you that's less than what you're making. Many of you that's more than what you're making. A lot of it's, geographic where you're actually working at. But we'll just go with this 90,000 for math purposes. If it doesn't apply to what you earned in residency or what you're currently earning, don't email us. Like, just change the numbers for your circumstances. So 90,000 per year. And let's assume you work 48 hours per week, but you spend a total of 60 hours per week, either at work, getting to or from work, doing notes at home, charting, etc. So, and again, if you work more than that or less than that, don't email us, just redo the calculation for you. So 90,000 a year, you spend a total of 60 hours per week on work related things, either
And maybe you
actual.
get like 4 weeks off per year. That's one thing that I was like kind of calculating in here too.
There we go. And we'll assume you get 4 weeks of vacation. So you're only working 48 weeks per year. Sorry.
Mhm.
Yeah, I missed that. I
That's
mentioned,
all good.
I said 48 hours per week rather than 48 weeks per year. So $60 or sorry, I'm all over the place. Let's reframe 48 weeks a year. So you have 4 weeks of vacation, 60 hours per week. And some of that is spent actually seeing patients, actually doing the work things. Some of it's getting to work, getting from work, changing, washing your hands, etc. So a little over $30 per hour, 60 hours per week, 48 weeks a year, 90,000 a year total. Depending on your specialty or again, location, etc. You might make more than this, you might make less than this per hour. Um, Now it is a lot harder to assign a value to time though, because you can't get, like Rachelle said, you can't get to that attending level without jumping through the training hoops. So you kind of just have to grind through it, and then your time is going to be worth a lot more per hour on a monetary work basis when you're through residency, fellowship, and onto an attending. Um, but yeah, it's an investment in your future. So you're putting in that effort now at that low dollar per hour wage, so that you have the ability to earn a lot more when you're at the big kid level. Kind of similar to Rochelle and I. As financial advisors, when you're early on in your career, you have zero clients starting out. You have to gradually build that client base. So you're working a lot of hours, putting in your best effort for the clients you do have, and working hard to attract new clients. And it's a grind. I probably worked 60, 70 hours a week, first handful of years of my career, sometimes more. I'd often be in the gym at our office at 11 or 12 p.m. or 11 p.m., 12 a.m. at night. The cleaning ladies would come through and be like, "Is this a weirdo on the elliptical at 11:30?" They just leave their cleaning cart and look at me in disgust and walk out. But yeah, it's, you gotta put in that effort to ultimately get to the next phase where you're still working hard, but it's maybe you have a little bit more control over your time, and you're making more money for the effort that you're putting in.
Absolutely. So once you get past that stage, which is again very hard to kind of calculate the real monetary value of the time that you're spending doing that. But as an attending physician, you kind of get to the point where you can do more of that. Like, what is this trade off? What is it that we are dealing with right here? So the first step that you'll want to do is just calculate an hourly rate for yourself. If you earn a salary of $250,000 per year and you have 6 weeks of vacation time and you work 36 hours a week, your before tax dollar per hour is like $150 per hour. But then you got to pay some taxes. So let's look at this on like an after tax basis. Taxes vary a lot from place to place. So you'll want to do this for yourself, for your like own, like where you live, what state you live in, all that kind of stuff. If you're married, filing jointly versus separately, all of those kinds of things. But in Oregon, I did like, what if you're married filing jointly? And your effective tax rate here would probably be around 27%, meaning your take home is like $110 per hour. What you get on your paycheck is probably not $110 per hour because you have some money that's going into maybe your 401k or your 403b. You have some money going to health insurance, but that's really your money too. So we're going to count that as part of your income because it is going to you, even if it's going towards like future you or covering some of your costs. So $110 per hour, like after taxes. And then if you're earning quite a bit more than that, let's say double, let's say you're making $500,000 per year, but you have a similar schedule, maybe, you're making about $200 per hour on an after tax basis. So your percentage you're taking home is a little bit lower because your effective tax rate is higher, but you're still taking home a good chunk of money. And now, like, once you've done that, you can take into consideration, like, okay, if this is my dollar per hour, how do I use that to help guide my decision making when I'm making these decisions about things like, should I pay someone else to do this or should I do it myself? How much should I work? All of those kinds of things it's really helpful to just understand like what your time is worth when you're making those decisions.
And you can think about how much more you would need to work to pay
Hmm.
for something like, hey, I want to get this new car. The payment's going to be $1,000 a month. Okay, if my take home pay is $100 per hour, I need to work an extra 10 hours per month, all else being equal to pay for this car and not have any other changes in our lifestyle. If it's $200 per hour, all right, we need to work an extra 5 hours per month to pay for this car. So it's basically an extra hour per week, hour and a quarter per week. Could be worth it to you, might not be worth it to you. To each their own.
I
And
really love thinking about it like that too. I really like assigning like this is this many hours of my time. That is how much this costs me. I love thinking about it in that way, but it does take a little bit of work to be able to get to the point where you can do that.
I do that all the time. Anytime we're looking at buying something large or, a
Hmm.
major home project, a new car, whatever it is, it's like, all right, how many
Yeah.
more hours do I need to work? Or how many hours? Like, even with just getting lunch, all right, this sandwich was $15. All right, that was how many minutes of work for me? And maybe that's just, I like math. So it's like, all right, I need to work this many minutes to pay for lunch. Okay, yeah, that's probably worth it. Um, but
Basically, we're math geeks. That's all there is to it. I mean,
Yeah, exactly. But then like if you're tacking on things like you have a car payment, all right, you do that calculation. All right, this is just an extra 5 hours per month that I need to work to cover this expense. And then you forget about it and your car payment's like 5 years long. And then 6 months later, all right, what if we added this new thing? How many hours per? Oh, that's only an extra 2 hours per week. And if you keep forgetting all the things you've stacked on previously that require those additional hours, before you know it, you're like an extra 40 hours per week of work to pay for all the things that you just wanted. So you got to, look at things that drop off. It's like, okay, we finally paid off the car. That $1,000 is off the books. That's 5 hours of my time at $200 per hour. Okay, now I could either work 5 hours less at the same
hmm
lifestyle, keep working and just save that $1,000 per month, or we could apply it to some other expense, whether it's let's get a new car now because we can have a new car payment or we go whatever, do something else.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
Kind of got
Yeah.
lost on
So
a tangent there.
no, I mean, I think this is all what we're talking about, though. So, if we're going to think about whether to pay someone else to do something for you, like, I think we're going to look at just the dollar amounts here. There are some intangibles here that are harder to quantify. So, sometimes a trained professional is going to do a better job than you, like maybe an accountant or a financial advisor or a painter. Like, maybe your paint's just going to look better if you don't do it yourself.
And they'll be
So,
able to
those,
do it in less time than you
yeah,
too. It's
totally.
like you
Yeah.
want to get some carpentry work done at your house. All right, they might be able to come out, bust it out in a day. You've got
Yeah.
to like watch YouTube videos, go to Home Depot, rent the saws and the equipment, measure
Hmm.
19 times to make sure you have it accurate. And it takes you 10 times as long to do something that a experienced person could do in a fraction of the time. It'd be like, if you're a surgeon and you've been doing the same procedure 1,000 times, you could crank it out in your sleep, but a
In an
new
hour.
resident,
Yeah.
it might take them 8 hours to do the same procedure because they're going slow and taking their time and making sure they're doing it correctly.
Yeah. Yeah. So we are going to use some very, very simple comparisons here just for the sake of argument. Let's assume, like, if you give yourself enough time, you can do it just as well. I think cleaning is a great example because you can look at exactly like how much it costs. And, you could probably do as good of a job if you cared to. Okay. So with cleaning, if you can pay someone $30 per hour to clean your house and you can earn $110 per hour and you hate cleaning, it's probably worth it to pay someone to clean your house. But if you'd rather clean your home because you can spend more time with your family at the same time and maybe teach them the value of actually cleaning their own home, I think my daughter may need that lesson right now, then that's a different story. Like there are other, obviously, some non financial considerations too. With an accountant, you can pay someone to complete your taxes. Let's say it costs $1,500, but maybe it would take you 7 hours to do. Maybe not worth it if you're earning $110 per hour. Maybe that's something you can spend some time doing. But if you can earn $300 per hour, probably totally worth it. Again, assuming you're confident that you can do it well enough on your own and file your taxes without like the additional anxiety of feeling like you're going to get audited and stuff like that. But it also assumes that you live in a vacuum and the only two options are to do it yourself or work during that time. And that's not necessarily what actually happens in real life. So keep in mind, if you enjoy like any of these things you can outsource, it's a completely different question. And it's not really about the money. And the opposite is also true. If you hate it, you may think that it is well worthwhile to pay someone else to do it, even if you could do it for yourself cheaper. So like that part plays into it as well. But it's good to know like the financial background of those decisions to help with that part of the decision making.
Yeah, not everyone has the option after you do that calculation to say, okay, yeah, I'm going to outsource this to the accountant and just work an extra 7 hours and
Mm-hmm.
make an extra however many hundreds or thousands of dollars over that 7 hours. Like you may not have the option to work an extra 7 hours to pay for that
Yep.
task. And yeah, like all the time, there's like, the cleaning, the painting. Yeah, you could probably hire someone to do it for a lot less than it takes you. Maybe you choose to do it yourself. There's other tasks where you electively pay a lot more than you make per hour. You could, in theory, do it yourself for less, but you just don't have the time to do it, don't have the confidence to do it. Just know it's just not going to get done ever well correctly if you try to do it yourself. And you're better off just paying that. I mean, that's why Rachelle and I exist. Like most financial advisors, you end up paying them more than you make per hour for the amount of time you're spending or the amount of time they're spending or charging per hour. Like if you were like not many financial advisors work on an hourly basis, but if you go find an hourly one, they're probably charging you, three, four, five, $7,000 per hour to do the planning work for you. Or if you're, paying them on a retainer or an AUM model, like, similar calculation, which is probably more than many of you are making, but you have the confidence that it's getting done correctly. It's
Mm-hmm.
getting done in less time than it would probably take you to do it yourself. And
Mm-hmm.
it's, you may not have the time or desire to do that yourself. It's just not something that's of interest to you, not something in your wheelhouse. You'd rather spend it going to your kids' soccer games or going on a bike ride or whatever, even if, working during that time isn't an option. Maybe you choose to work instead. It's like, yeah, I'm just busy and I'm on a production-based model and there's unlimited patients waiting at the door. Like I could just work 24 hours a day if I wanted to and see patients and make piles of money. Great. You may choose to do that.
Yeah. Yep. And with some of those like more professional things, the goal is a lot of times that the end result is better. So that's harder to quantify as well. Okay. But we can also relate this back to like, how does this relate to your expenses and your goals? So everyone has a baseline amount of expenses. Oh, not everyone. Most people have like a baseline amount of expenses that they have every month, and they need to work a certain amount just to cover the basics. So it's good to like kind of understand what that looks like as well for you. So if you have a $2,000 per month mortgage and you have $3,000 in additional kind of necessary expenses, bills and food and things like that, it's $5,000 total. And that's not too terrible with, whether you're making $250,000 a year or $500,000 per year. If you're taking home after tax $100 per or $110 per hour based on that like 250K example, that's like 45 hours per month to to cover your basic expenses if they're only $5,000 per month. But as your expenses get higher, it becomes more challenging. What if your mortgage is $5,000 a month? So now our combined expenses per month are 8,000. What if it's $10,000 per month? Like we are starting to see, I think, a lot higher mortgage payments as the cost of housing kind of increases, but also as interest rates have stayed higher for a while longer. Like my clients that have new mortgages are paying a lot more for their mortgage than my clients who took out mortgages 3, 4, 5 years ago. So again, it's going to take more hours to cover basic expenses as your fixed expenses get higher and higher. So that's something to consider and maybe try to like keep your fixed expenses lower if possible so that you don't have this like you have to work this many hours or else like or at least making it so those like necessary hours are not completely just off the charts, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Keep going.
Same thing about goals, college savings, retirement, repayment of debt, all of those kinds of things. As you settle into attending life, this is going to be when a lot of those things become more feasible and you can put more resources towards those. But just as one example, if you're working on college savings and your goals like line up with like we can do $1,000 a month and this will help us achieve our goals. Like first of all, you got to get to that number for the goals. Like we've talked about that in separate episodes as well. But with $1,000 per month, that may be 9 hours of work per month at $110 per hour. So, with that $250,000 annual salary, that's 9 hours per month. Is it worth it to you, to make sure that your kid has like ample resources for college? Probably, but it's worth it to ask yourself that question and redefine your goals a little bit if it just is not lining up the way that you thought it did in your mind. Maybe you thought you could basically work 4 hours per month and that would meet what your college goals were. So it's important to kind of keep those in consideration when you're talking about your long-term goals as well. Retirement's a little bit more complicated, but you kind of land on that dollar per month that you need to be putting towards your retirement goals and think about how many hours does that equal? Is that worth it? Do I want to retire at 60 or is it worth it to me to maybe work a little bit less now and retire at 62 or 63? Like there are all of those trade-offs that you can be thinking about when you really understand like how much you're making per hour and like how much work you actually need to put in order to achieve these goals.
Yeah. And beyond covering those basic expenses and being on track to meet those goals, how much more do you want to work, either to accelerate the trajectory to achieve those goals or, be
Do
able
more
to,
fun stuff.
yeah, increase your lifestyle, or do you want to do more fun stuff? Like some people really enjoy working. They don't have hobbies. Their work is their
Yeah.
hobby. That's their life. They love it. And you can earn money at the same time, which is great. If you like what you do and you can get paid to do it, I mean, it's one of those get to jobs, not one of those got
Mm-hmm.
to jobs. So for others, you work to earn money so that you can do all the other things you enjoy spending your time doing. You're working to live rather than living to work. And this discussion really comes into play when people want to work less, especially earlier in their careers. And maybe you're in a position where you could reduce your workload from say 40 hours a week to 30 hours a week or 50 to 40, whatever it is, just working less than you're currently working. And whether that means you have to delay some of your goals by a few years, but you're content with that, or you're just in a position where you're on track and you can afford to do less. You don't need the extra money. Um, maybe you want to work less and you can afford to work less, but you need to keep at the same level just to maintain harmony within the practice. You don't want to have discord among your peers, your partners. Like you don't want to feel like you're not pulling your weight, or vice. You don't want them to feel like you're not putting in your fair share. So sometimes it's not as simple as, oh, I'm just going to work less and make less. There's a whole functioning ecosystem at your job, and everyone plays a role in it. But assuming that's not the case, and you can scale down if you want to, is it worth it to you to work, 5 extra hours for an extra 600 or $1,000? For some people, You do want to work it. You have expenses or you want to accelerate your goals. You have personal obligations. For other people, it's not worth it to work the extra hours. You'd rather have that time with your family. You'd rather go to t-ball games and or engage in a hobby. Like it's hard to put a value or a price on going to your kids' activities and sporting events. It's like economically, worst decision you could ever make. Your kid sucks at baseball. Their team's terrible. They can't throw a pass to first base. Like after they hit, they don't even know which direction to run. Like you're better off working. And then if you want to go see a baseball game, go to an MLB game. But that's anyone who's a parent knows that's not what it's about. Like, it's invaluable that time. You can't really put a price tag on it. And, you could be paid $1 million per hour and you might say, I'm not going to work these few hours because I'm going to go to the t-ball game. I want to be there for my family. It's not worth it. I don't care how much you're willing to pay me. Eventually there's a price. Like if someone says, hey, I'll give you $1 million if you skip your kid's baseball game this week and do this thing, then yeah, I'd probably do it. But if it's an
I
every
would do it.
week, yeah, assuming there's other games that I can go to, if,
Yes.
if someone said, hey, I'll pay you $1 million, but you're not allowed to go to any of your kids' games this year, I'd probably turn them down. Like that's probably not worth it. Um, I'd rather work a few more years and be there for the kids and see them grow up. Financial planning isn't only about making money and saving money. It's also about making those informed decisions of whether the money's even an end goal. You might want to take some time off again to be with the family, go engage in a hobby for your own well-being, exercise, mental health. Like it's not economically beneficial for me to play golf. I like playing golf. I'm not very good at it. Some days I'd probably be better off working than losing a dozen balls and shooting 25 over par. But it's on the days where I'm playing a little better. It's fun. It's enjoyable. I'm out with friends, getting some exercise, some fresh air. It's worth it for me. But I also got to balance the family side of it too. Like I got to
Hmm.
make those economical decisions at home. Being putting in the family time and being there as a supportive spouse.
Yep.
Um, but yeah, money is not always the end goal, as all of you are probably well aware. And I think I mentioned it before, but are you living to work or are you working to live? Hopefully you have a life outside of work and you have some hobbies that you enjoy, whether you have a family or not. Hopefully there's some social circle that you can engage in and have some enjoyable moments with. And, we got to make sometimes those trade-offs of it's not all about the money. It's about actually enjoying life. So you have some stories at the end to share.
We got all mushy again today, Corey, but I love it. I can tell you right now, I definitely don't spend $50 to grow 5 tomatoes because it's economically the right choice to do
Plus
it
the
because it's
time
fun.
that you put in growing those
So
tomatoes,
much time
planting them.
staring at them.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So, give it some thought, just like with everything. It always depends, right?
Yep. Yep.
Thanks for listening.
See you next time.